Welcome back to Bisexual Killjoy, the place where we know bisexuality isn't a phase, it's a phenomenon. I'm Bailey, and this is
Jace.
As we kick off this season, our third season, we want you to know that we've solemnly sworn to keep it real and relevant. The world outside of my closet feels pretty bleak, but today in this closet, we are excited to be back with you with all of these new episodes in which we talk about intersectionality, specifically what it is, what it's not, and why it is so important for bi+ folks like us to take up space at the intersections of multiple identities. The stakes have really never been higher for queer people. Millions of actual lives are on the line as we watch a full-scale attack on our rights unfold. So we're recording this episode on February 17th, 2025, and things may have changed by the time we reach you. And I hope that they have changed for the better.
And it's not just about recognizing what's happening. We need to equip ourselves with the tools to resist. So today, we're talking about intersectionality, what it actually is, what it's not, and how it helps us build a stronger, more informed movement.
Because if there's one thing I hate, it is talking about doing shit, but not actually doing shit. And so, that said, I want to root into actionable steps whenever possible, today and every day, going forward this season and for the rest of my life. Anyway, so Jace, what is in your Killjoy survival kit right now?
So very quickly, a Killjoy survival kit is another one of these concepts that we've borrowed from Sarah Ahmed. And it's important to remember that being a Killjoy can take a toll on ourselves, on our bodies, on our mental health, and it can also take a toll on relationships. And what's important about a Killjoy survival kit is that it equips us and it allows us to hold close all the things that remind us why it's important to fight the good fight, why it's important to take up space, and also give us permission when we need to take a sick day. So my Killjoy survival kit these days, I hold very close, and I hope that this is acceptable for our listeners, that I get sappy in the first few minutes.
Okay.
But recently, one of our Substack posts went live about how I didn't feel guilty about being a Killjoy until I was faced with this image of being difficult, of taking too much space. And the guilt set in a very real way. And I was like really scared to release that, I think, which is probably why it went off schedule. I was like, yeah, it's ready to go. And then it's like, yeah, well, are we sure?
Did you ever publish it? No. And you're like, it's Friday. I'm like, okay.
Yeah. But we got some beautiful responses from you all about how grateful you were that I opened myself up in that way and that I shared that all with you. And honestly, those messages and those comments made it to my Killjoy survival kit. It reminded me so much of how being vulnerable can be scary and how necessary it is, especially in a time like today.
Yeah.
Because folks feel guilty for being a Killjoy. They feel guilty for taking up space. I have. And it's important that we remind each other that we've been there to help each other feel seen and heard and cared for in this way.
Yeah. And in terms of practically doing that, I would encourage folks who are able to do so is to start writing. You are living through interesting times, and the best way to chronicle those times is to take a record of it, process how you're feeling. It will help you in the long run. Divest yourself of those high negative emotions. It doesn't have to be good. No one has to see it. But for you, it could be important to process. But in terms of other resources and practical steps that we can think about going forward into this season and also into whatever the next fucking 4 years bring, you should be seeking community. And we will be talking about community a lot this season, and not just in the cerebral sense, like find your friends, because making friends and making community is actually hard. It is an active verb. Community is a verb, in my opinion.
Yes.
And it's not just going to show up at your doorstep. You have to invite them to the doorstep. And what I would recommend to our American listeners, because I know more about these resources, is to find your regional bisexual resource center. For our New Englanders, that's probably the Bisexual Resource Center, the BRC. People on the West Coast, LA Bi+ Task Force. Folks in the Midwest, the Bisexual Organizing Project in Minnesota, and BQAC in Chicago. And then also in the South, we have Bi+ Atlanta. And I just encourage you to email them about things, because your community cannot respond to you if it doesn't know what it needs to do for you. So if you're like, hey, I want this event, ask them, do you have anything like this? And maybe they don't. And if they don't, you say, okay, well, how can I organize it? And we'll start there, because when Jace and I started Bisexual Killjoy, it wasn't because we really just had so much free time and wanted to do this cute little project where we talk about bisexual issues. But it was because we couldn't find the resources that we needed while we were in school. And even as growing up as bi plus people, we were stuck piecing things together on our own, even though in theory, there are a lot of resources out there, just kind of hard to get them in a centralized place. So we decided to create something for the next generation of bi plus people. And this podcast is our passing down what we've learned so that you can do something with it.
This is public scholarship. It's activism. And this project is here to help you feel more informed, more grounded, empowered to act, and remind you of these core truths of your bisexuality.
Yeah, because as we all know, the stakes have never been higher. And I'm not talking about cows that have just eaten a bunch of marijuana. I'm talking about, yeah, you're welcome. We do puns on here. What's happening politically right now, and I'm laughing to keep myself from yelling. We're in a crisis. Girl, you're in danger. The rights of queer and trans people, especially those who exist at multiple intersections, and intersections we will talk about more, but I'll just briefly say you are not just a bisexual person. You are also maybe a white person or a cisgender person or a person who lives in a safe haven state. Well, we're going to talk about all of these things. But those people who exist at marginalized intersections are under threat in a way that they haven't been in a long time, and in many ways never before.
So we're shifting our focus to center resistance this season. We'll be exploring specific intersections, how power structures overlap and create gaps in systems, and more importantly, how we can survive and fight back.
And boy, oh boy, do we need to fight back. But before we even touch that, because we will be talking again, I'm really excited about this season. I feel like we have so many things to say. We've already had some great conversations with researchers and activists in the space, but we need to lay the groundwork for you properly, because for the past 2 seasons, we have been building to this. Season 1 giving you a foundation of bi plus scholarly theory and research basis. And then also in season 2, just bringing more experts to the table so that you feel better about us knowing what we're actually talking about. But let's talk about intersectionality. So intersectionality originated in academic spaces. A lot of stuff does and trickles down and gets diffused in both positive and negative ways among, everyday people. So legal scholar Kimberlé Crenshaw coined the term to highlight how current systems addressing marginalizations fail people who exist at the intersections of multiple forms of oppression, especially Black women. So here's the critical thing. Intersectionality is not just about individual identity or life experiences. It's not about saying everyone's experience is unique because we all have different social locations. No. Intersectionality is a framework that reveals systemic gaps, and it asks who is falling through these gaps, how are systems of power overlapping to harm them in ways that can't be addressed with single issue solutions, and it is not about saying everyone's experience is unique.
So let's break this down with an example. When a woman of color experiences harassment, she faces a dilemma. Should she bring this up to her boss as a feminist gender issue because it's sexism, or as an anti-racism racist issue because it's racism? Intersectionality reveals that these 2 forms of oppression combine and create a new, distinct experience. You can't just separate them into sexism plus racism. It's something else entirely. If I were to bring this up to my boss, it wouldn't be as simple as saying, oh, it's because I'm a woman, or, oh, it's because I'm Black. Because both of these are likely, more than likely, most certainly interacting together in this interaction, in what propelled the interaction, in how she responded to it, and literally everything else. For our bi plus listeners, this probably sounds a bit familiar. People often think that bi plus experiences are just a blend of sometimes gay, sometimes straight. If we do both of those, somehow everybody will fit in. But we know better. Being bi plus is its own thing. Similarly, being a bisexual woman of color means that my experience of oppression is not ever going to be neatly divided into biphobia, sexism, or racism. It's a combination of all of those things happening at once, transforming each other. we could probably even add more layers of these kinds of oppressions. I'm a first-gen grad student, for example. I am the eldest daughter. When my father passed away, I served as the main caretaker for my family. And all of these things are going to work together in the ways that I respond to systems and that systems respond to me. Oftentimes, the tools available at my disposal are not going to address all of the situations that are happening or any of them in any sort of proper capacity.
It's almost like we're complex people and not just a single one-dimensional item, right? We're so many things. It's funny, I was talking about this earlier today with Life of Bi, where we're discussing biphobia and bi erasure and how it impacts bi people. And they had no idea. They're like, oh, well, my bisexuality doesn't really impact. Surely it doesn't. And I love surprising people like, actually, have you ever been in this situation? Like I'm in an infomercial.
As a matter of fact.
Have you ever run into this problem before? Yeah, it's amazing. You don't want to think of yourself as like a victim of oppression in any sense, but because of who you are and how the world views you, and the world is going to view you as neutrally as perhaps you try to present yourself, that in itself is something that it will be perceived. It's going to respond to you in a certain way. And now you might be listening to this podcast, getting into season 3, and there are so many more of you than there were at the start. And like, why are people listening to us? But it's because we're smart. We're smart and we're charming.
It's because we're fun.
Are we fun?
This is any of this fun?
We're talking about the death of the Western world, and it's like, we're having fun. Sorry for the podcast. I think that, Jace, you and I can get up pretty high in terms of our voice. We have a pretty large register. Dogs can hear us in the next room as listeners are listening to this in their headphones. Sorry to your dogs. Okay. I'm sorry. Tangent. I've been feeling some type of way the last couple of weeks. I want to get back to intersectionality and why it is critical. And she's got a bad rap. Intersectionality is this thing that leftists do. This is what the libs do. When intersectionality is whether or not you believe in her, she exists. But why is it critical to both talk about it, acknowledge it, and take it into our lives? So we're living through a time in which systems that are supposed to protect people, and that's on shaky ground to begin with, but healthcare, education, government programs are failing spectacularly, and they are failing the most vulnerable among us first.
Right. Intersectionality helps us recognize how power structures like racism, sexism, ableism, classism, and homophobia don't just stack on top of each other. They overlap and compound to create completely new forms of oppression and the ways that those oppressions are experienced.
And like you just said, bi+ folks know firsthand because we have always existed in the margins. We don't fit neatly into those gay or straight boxes. Historically, that's meant that we've been left out of resources for both communities, ignored by straight folks, and let's be real, sometimes erased by the greater queer community.
And let's be real. The thing is, these failures aren't isolated. When we talk about systems failing, we're not just talking about individual moments of discrimination or incidents. We're talking about systemic issues that leave people without any other choice, without the support they need to survive and thrive. And honestly, it sucks to be, it just sucks to be at this specific union point and feel and know thoroughly within you that there's just no way to address everything holistically because you exist at this union point and have those outside say, but look at all of these things. Look at all the things. And it's like, that's not how this works.
No. I mean, if you think about how bi+ people are more likely to face mental health struggles or poverty, it's because we're consistently excluded from the safety nets that are supposed to catch us. And I think I mean that in terms of like queer safety nets. But also, if you're poor, you're less likely to be able to get access to healthcare or even to go seek healthcare in the first place because you've been conditioned to think, like I'll go to the emergency room if it gets that bad. But if you're a bi+ person of color or a disabled bi+ person, those risks multiply, right? And intersectionality gives us the language to talk about why that happens and helps us also to think about what to do at those intersections that are so unique to each population.
But it also gives us something even more powerful. Intersectionality gives us a way to fight back. When we recognize how power overlaps and works to push us out, we can start building coalitions that push back and resist. One-size-fits-all solutions have never worked for BI+ folks or for anyone living at these union points. We need community-driven intersectional solutions. We need to listen to people who are living these experiences every day and not just brush it off as everybody's experiences are different.
And that's what this season is designed to be about, educating ourselves and each other about each other, building up our communities, and figuring out how to resist in ways that are sustainable. Because I told you, we're going to keep it real this year, as overwhelmed though we may feel. There's so much work that needs to be done. It will need to be done over the next 4 years. And hopefully, we'll still have the freedom to do that. I don't know. I don't want to be like super pessimistic here, but just want everyone to know kind of where my emotions are in this moment. Because it's easy to get overwhelmed when you're constantly being hit with bad news. That's the design of it. Like the last couple of weeks have been designed to make you feel helpless and hopeless. But we are trying to give people concrete actions that they can take. Resistance, okay? Resistance is about staying grounded, informed, connected to your community. And together, we want to start helping you build your toolkit.
First and foremost, stay informed. The first step is always going to be stay informed, but not just from mainstream news sources. Look for reliable voices that center intersectional perspectives. Follow BI+ activists, BIPOC creators, and independent journalists who are doing the work on the ground. Social media can be a great resource, but it's also a double-edged sword. Make sure you're not just consuming surface-level takes. Dig deeper, read books, highly recommend Feminist Killjoy Handbook, listen to podcasts like this one, attend workshops if you can, and be mindful of burnout. Staying informed does not mean being plugged in 24/7. I'm going to say that again. Staying informed does not mean being plugged in 24/7. Give yourself permission to take breaks, come back when you're ready, and make sure to develop strategies to stay grounded in your body.
Yeah, and I do want to emphasize the fact that not being plugged in doesn't give you permission to check out. You are allowed to take breaks, but you are not allowed to check out of what's going on right now. So again, I have a timer on my phone for many news sources. I'm allowed to look at the news in the morning. I'm allowed to look at the news in the afternoon and then not before bed. Otherwise, I won't sleep. But I'm not checked out, as scary as it all is.
Yeah, and I have a similar strategy. Me and my partner have about an hour window from like 3 to 4 p.m. or so where we can talk about what's happening and get up to date. And then we take time to breathe. Mm-hmm. It's important to breathe to make sure that you are sleeping properly and taking care of yourself, because the strategy is to get us as rattled as possible. We cannot, I will repeat, we cannot allow them to do that.
Yeah. And if you want to feel like you're actually making a difference, and this will help you feel more engaged with your community around you and the people around you, it will also help you feel like you're doing something, because you are, but like you have a little bit more control, and that's to get involved. Once you are informed, once you have gotten your news, you're listening to the sources that you trust, that are trustworthy, it's time to get involved. I want you to find local organizations or online communities that are working on the issues that matter most to you. This doesn't have to be BI specific. I'm not telling you that you need to get involved in your local BI+ organization, because you probably care a lot more about like making sure trans people have access to healthcare, or making sure that the people who are in those vulnerable populations are getting the care that they need. This doesn't mean that you have to take on the world by yourself. There are so many people already doing the work. I'm not asking you to go reinvent that wheel, because the wheel is already rolling and it just needs people to push it. So start small. Identify that org that you're interested in and go to a meeting, okay? Volunteer for an event. Even just introducing yourself and offering your skills can make a difference, because I promise you have skills. You could be that person who makes really nice Canva art. You could be that person who is really good at spreadsheets. All skills are usable skills, especially at a time right now. And, I don't want you to underestimate the power of digital activism. You might be homebound. Like going out is really a struggle for you. There's so many online spaces with people who are actually doing things. I'm thinking about the QT library right now, which exists primarily in an online space. And they have raised so much money for a queer and trans library here in Boston. So sharing resources, signing petitions, using your platform to amplify others is real work. And I don't want you to discredit it, especially not right now when every little bit does help.
You can also support BI+ creators and activists.
Hello.
This one is really, really close to our hearts. Supporting BI+ creators and activists is a tangible way to strengthen the movement. That means donating when you can, sharing their work with friends or not friends, recommending their projects to others. Visibility is important, but sustainability is critical. If you love a podcast, spread the word. Read the post, buy the merch. If there's a BI+ writer you admire, pre-order their book. Support keeps people going. More than just helpful, it is imperative to show your support for those who are already doing things that you love.
Yeah, because do you know how I hear negative things more often than I hear positive things? And it's always like, oh, that squeaky wheel gets the grease. Girl, look, we are the wheel, right? I already used the wheel metaphor, so it tracks. Tell us nice things. Tell us what this podcast means to you. Or if there's another podcast out there that you really like and is doing good work, celebrate them because we are as much under siege as anyone else. I don't know if you've noticed that we haven't been on social media as often the last couple of weeks, but it's just because the world online is a toxic fucking place when you're a queer person and we need our cups filled too. So I'm just like, tell us we're doing a good job and that we're pretty, please.
Your messages really do make it to our Killjoy survival kits for realsies.
And Jace will screenshot me an email that I have access to just so that they could double down on the joy. Appreciate that.
I promised that I was gonna lower that, but every time y'all send us a message, I send a screenshot and I tell Bailey, this one was worth it. I promise though.
It's like 8 of them.
This one is worth it to keeping your camera real. And it's like, spoiler alert, it's all of them.
I know. I'm literally looking at the inbox as you're sending me the message. I'm like, okay.
I'm not sorry.
I know you're not sorry. Okay. So much like this, what Jace and I do for each other, we do take care of each other through these unprecedented times. I hate that phrase. Anyway, because resistance is a long game. You are no good to the movement if you are constantly running on empty. I wrote that line for me because I needed to read it. But self-care gets thrown around a lot. Sometimes I'm like a grumpy boomer when it comes to self-care. I'm like, oh, you soft kids. And then I crash out for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I know. But what I'm actually talking about is taking time to rest, getting the sleep that you need, unplugging. Unfortunately, what sleep experts say about unplugging an hour before bed is real. Reflecting, journaling really does help to process emotions. There are plenty of studies on that. And I'll find some resources to share in the show notes as well, just so you can say like, oh, where do I even start to think about journaling or what can I write about? And then just recharge. If you get pleasure out of playing video games, play video games for a while. Take a walk, even though it's 6 degrees in Boston today.
Oh.
And find people that you trust. Lean on them. I wouldn't lean on Jace if I didn't trust Jace, right? I wouldn't complain about the state of the world if I didn't believe that they were like, I see you. I don't always agree with what you're complaining about, but I do see you, Bailey.
Yeah.
And then build those networks of support and don't feel guilty about stepping back when you need to, as long as you know that you're coming back to the table, because checking out is not the point.
No. And it's important to remember that sometimes self-care doesn't look very pretty. It doesn't always look like candles and a bubble bath. Though I do love me a good bubble bath. Sometimes it looks like forcing yourself to put the phone down so that you can take that bubble bath and go sleep. And that's really hard. Something that can often be very hard for me is getting up to eat breakfast. And I know that eating breakfast is a really important act of self-care that I do not love to do. I do not love the idea of making dishes for me to eat and then having to do dishes again. Like that sounds annoying.
Yeah, it is.
But it is important to keep ourselves going and to be fueled. So make sure that you are taking care of yourself the best way you know how.
Yeah, sometimes my form of self-care is sitting in the closet that I'm recording in right now and making myself cry because I need the catharsis. And I will watch some sad pet videos, or I'll watch estranged family members be rejoined for the first time in 20 years, and I'll sob my eyes out. And I let myself have that space because 1, I don't cry often enough. And 2, I know that the work will be there when I'm done and when I feel better. And the work will always be there, even after the next 4-year nightmare ends. And I waffle between feeling pessimistic and optimistic and like it will end. even when that is over and we move into a more positive light, there will still be work to do. That's the thing about work. It always needs to be done. But the important thing is that we stay in this together. Resistance is about sustainability, not burning yourself out. So we do have homework. I know you missed the homework. I know you really missed us telling you what to do. You're welcome. You don't have to think for yourself. For our allies, I want you to remember that you shouldn't stay on the sidelines. I want you to share this episode. I want you to find a Bi+ organization near you and to donate to it. I want you to advocate for policies that protect the most vulnerable in our communities. And right now, that is trans people. That is, our trans siblings are very much vulnerable. And so if you can donate to trans organizations or causes, you should do that. And I just want you to know that that adage about like, oh, well, they didn't come for me. They came for the so-and-so and I did nothing. And they came for the so-and-so, I did nothing. And then they came for me and there was no one to stand up. Let's be real about that. If you are listening to this podcast and you are on season 3, but you're not Bi+, I will count you as an ally. And I hope that you hear me and I hope that you do something.
For our Bi+ listeners, remember that you're not alone. You have power and you can use it to build the world you want to see. We'll be here every step of the way. And please know, for our Bi+ listeners and allies, that donating does not always mean monetarily.
Yeah.
It can mean time. It can mean skills. And for those who don't know where to begin, let me share something with you. Here at Bisexual Killjoy, we're making sure that we practice what we preach. Behind the scenes, we're working really hard to make sure that this podcast is accessible at multiple levels. But we need your help. If you're interested in joining Bisexual Killjoy team as a volunteer, make sure that you're subscribed to our Substack and keep an eye on your inbox. We would love to have you, and we definitely need your help.
Yeah, especially if you're a social media guru, because the world is a toxic place. I already work in social media in my day job, and Bailey's at her limit. Bailey is at her limit.
And if you want to learn a new skill, this is also a great place to start.
We will write you a letter of recommendation. If you're trying to go to school, I will write you a glowing review, okay?
Yeah, and if you just want a safe place to learn, we are absolutely here. It's going to be so great.
Are we a safe place? Are we safe?
We're safe. You can learn here.
It's friendly. Yeah. It's a friendly place.
It is a friendly place. Thank you so much for making it to this point in the episode for season 3. I am so ready for all of the topics that we're going to be covering this season. We'll be talking about Bi+ mental health, the intersection of Bi+ness with race and ethnicity, Bi+ness and neurodiversity, parenthood, trans experience. We have so much going on and we are so ready to share it all with you. And we look forward to hearing your takes, your takeaways, and anything that this inspires you to reflect on.
And if you have a content creator that you listen to regularly and you deeply believe in what they're talking about, especially as it pertains to these intersections, send them our way. We would love to make more friends and to bring more experts into this sphere because this is an intersectional podcast and we want to have experts from all over the place to just talk to us about what they're good at and how that might intersect with the Bi+ experience. And not might, it does. So thank you for tuning into Bisexual Killjoy, where we know that bisexuality isn't a phase, it is a phenomenon. And to support us, share us with your friends, that cantankerous relative that you don't like to talk to about queerness. Subscribe to our Substack, rate our podcast, preferably 5 stars. And as always, we do want to hear from you. You can share your stories with us on Instagram or via email at bisexualkilljoy@gmail.com. We would love to answer your questions in our advice column, Give It To Me Bi+, so you can check out the Substack for more details on that. And until we meet again, keep being a bisexual killjoy.
Stay bisexual and stay strong.